我在这儿。
对，您我这个。
各位朋友们，大家下午好。
All friends, good afternoon.
我是中国公共外交协会的秘书长霍颖。
My name is Huo Ying, the Secretary General of the China Public Diplomacy Association (CPDA).
我谨代表中国公共外交协会，欢迎大家参加本次的零甲7号沙龙专题吹风会。
Firstly, on behalf of the China Public Diplomacy Association (CPDA), I'd like to welcome all of you to participate in today's 0.7th Salon Press Conference.
首先呀，请允许我介绍一下出席我们今天吹风会的中方的3位嘉宾。
Firstly, please allow me to give you the introduction about the 3 distinguished guests attending our today's briefing conference.
他们分别是外交部军控司的孙晓波司长、中国军控与裁军协会的李池江秘书长、生态环境部核与辐射安全中心首席专家刘新华先生。
They are as follows: Director General Sun Xiaobo of the Department of the Arms Control of MFA, Secretary General Li Chijiang of China Arms Control and Disarmament Association, Chief Expert Liu Xinhua of Nuclear and Radiation Safety Center of the Ministry of Ecology and Environment.
我们今天的沙龙聚焦的问题是日本核污染水的排海问题。
In our today's Salon Press Conference, our main topic is about the issue of the Japan's discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean.
大家都知道啊，这个不久前啊，日本政府宣布，今年春夏期间要将这个福岛第1核电站的核污染的水排入大海。日本的民众、周边国家的政府和民众，以及跨国的民间组织啊，纷纷发声表示反对。
As we all know, not long ago, the Japanese government announced that it plans to discharge the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station in this summer and spring. And the surrounding countries' government and the Japanese people, as well as the cross-border international organizations, deliver their message in a voice of fighting against this action.
大家担忧的是，这个放射性的物质会对海洋环境产生长久的影响，同时会对渔业和相关的产业造成严重的冲击。
Everyone concerns that the radioactive materials may bring a long-term influence to the marine or the ocean environment in the longer term. It also may bring a strong shock and damage to the fishery industry and the relevant industries.
为阐明中方的有关立场啊，我们从科学和专业的角度来阐释日本核污染的水排海方案的缺陷和危害。我们今天有幸邀请到了刚才上述的3位嘉宾，和各位记者朋友们进行一个深度的交流。
In order to fully present the position of the Chinese stance and try to interpret and explain the damage as well as the harm of the Japan's action of the plan to discharge the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean from the scientific and professional perspective, we are honored today that we invited the previously mentioned the three distinguished guests and the speakers to have an in-depth discussion and communication with all of the media friends.
下面呢，我们首先想请孙晓波司长发言，有请。
Firstly, we'd like to invite Director General Sun Xiaobo to deliver a speech. Now let's welcome.
Good afternoon, dear friends from the press. Welcome to this briefing. Today, we would like to use this opportunity to present to friends from the press China's positions, positions of the Chinese government with regard to the Japanese government decision, unilateral decision to discharge the nuclear contaminated water produced at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station into the ocean. As we all know, 12 years ago, on March 11th, 2011, there has been a nuclear accident of the highest level occurred at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. 3 reactor cores were melted and damaged, releasing a large amount of radioactive materials. So the Fukushima nuclear accident has brought a heavy disaster to the Japanese people. The Chinese government and people expressed deep sympathy and provided the necessary assistance within our best capacity to the Chinese government, to the Japanese government and people. However, regrettably, with regard to the discharge of the nuclear contaminated water from the Fukushima accident, Japan has unilaterally decided to discharge into the ocean in total disregard of the concerns and interests of the people from China and other countries of the world. So today, in my introduction, I would like to make the following points. First, we cannot neglect the harm caused by the discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean. Let me explain. The seawater brought by the tsunami, the cooling water injected into the reactor cores, and the groundwater and rainwater that came into contact with the reactor cores were all contaminated, producing a large amount of nuclear contaminated water. Initial assessment shows that the nuclear contaminated water contains more than 60 radionuclides, including tritium. I hope that you understand all those words. Carbon-14, cobalt-60, strontium-90, iodine-129, etc. The half-life of tritium is about 13 years, and that of carbon-14 is more than 5,000 years. And there is not yet effective technology to treat many of those radionuclides. Some long-lived radionuclides may spread with the ocean currents and form a bioconcentration effect, which will multiply the total amount of radionuclides in the environment, causing unpredictable harm to the marine environment and human health. So it is incumbent for the Japanese government to respond to the concerns of the international community and discharge the nuclear contaminated water in a responsible manner consistent with its international obligations. And second, the disposal of nuclear contaminated water from Fukushima is by no means Japan's private matter. Until now, the Fukushima nuclear accident has generated more than 1.3 million tons of contaminated water, with about 100 tons being further produced every day. That contaminated water was stored temporarily in over 1,000 storage tanks, which is expected to be discharged over a period of 30 years into the ocean. According to a research by a German marine research institution, within 57 days of the discharge, the radioactive materials will spread to most of the Pacific Ocean, and in 10 years to the waters across the world. So the discharge of nuclear contaminated water has cross-border impact on the marine environment and public health. Stakeholders like China, Republic of Korea, Russia, DPRK, and other Japanese neighbors and Pacific Island countries have repeatedly expressed grave concern over Japan's wrong decision. So last month, the Pacific Island Forum Secretary General, Mr. Henry Puna, stressed that Japan's decision to discharge the nuclear contaminated water into the sea is not a domestic matter of Japan, but a global issue. There are also strong voices of opposition within Japan. However, Japan has failed to conduct full and meaningful consultations with its neighbors and other stakeholders. On April the 13th, 2021, Japan unilaterally decided to discharge the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean after treatment. So it is only logical and legitimate for China and other stakeholders to express our concern over and firm opposition to that decision. Third, Japan's decision to discharge the Fukushima nuclear contaminated water into the ocean is driven by selfish interests. The disposal of nuclear contaminated water should be decided upon with the greatest prudence. And there is no precedent in discharging nuclear contaminated water caused by a nuclear accident into the ocean. We know that Japan initially proposed 5 ways to dispose of nuclear contaminated water, including injection into the ground, discharge into the ocean, vapor release as hydrogen gas into the atmosphere, and underground burial. However, we believe Japan did not conduct a thorough study of the other disposal options except for ocean discharge. Instead, Japan uses limited space as an excuse to stop building new storage tanks and decide to discharge the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean, transferring the risks to all mankind, to other countries. And fourth, Japan has not seriously responded to international concerns and addressed them accordingly. There are a lot of questions left unanswered. For example, is ocean discharge the best option? If the treated nuclear contaminated water indeed meets the relevant discharge standards as claimed by the Japanese government, then why not discharge it domestically? According to media reports, the Tokyo Electric Power Company has a track record of data tampering. So is the data it released on nuclear contaminated water still trustworthy? How can it prove the effectiveness and long-term reliability of the nuclear contaminated water purification devices? Is Japan's environmental impact assessment report comprehensive and scientific? And can it ensure that there will be no negative impact on the environment? Japan has yet to provide sufficient scientific and factual and convincing explanations to those questions. So China has expressed concerns to the Japanese government based on the spirit of science and out of the sense of responsibility for the health of our own people, the global marine environment, and international public interest. We also provided two sets of list of technical questions to the Japanese government. And for the second one, was a joint list of questions submitted by both China and Russia last November. But so far, there has been no feedback from the Japanese government. And also, in February this year, the Pacific Island Forum stated that according to the independent assessment of the PIF panel of experts, there is insufficient data to classify the impending discharge by Japan as safe for Pacific people and the ocean's biodiversity. And Japan only provided limited data and information despite the PIF's repeated requests. So all these facts show that it is time for Japan to face up to the concerns of the international community and provide responsible clarifications. And the fifth point, Japan actually did not show respect to the authority of the relevant international organizations, namely the IAEA. Japan claimed that its discharge plan has been endorsed by the IAEA. And this is not true. As you all know, currently there is a IAEA task force conducting review and assessment in Japan. And this task force has not yet finished its review and assessment. And there is no final conclusion yet. And on the contrary, the task force found that the discharge plan approved by the Japanese government was inconsistent with the IAEA safety standards in many areas. So in spite of all that, Japan insisted on pushing through the discharge plan in July last year and stepped up construction of the discharge pipelines. Just right before the visit by the IAEA task force to Japan on January 16th this year, Japan announced that it would start discharging the nuclear contaminated water around spring or summer this year. So this is not an action that a responsible country is supposed to take. And this is also in violation of Japan's legal obligations under the international law. So friends from the press, to conclude my introduction, I would like to say that the Pacific Ocean is not Japan's sewer for discharging its nuclear contaminated water. Japan should take an objective and science-based approach and dispose the nuclear contaminated water in a way that is safe and consistent with the international law, the international safe standards, and international good practices. That includes a thorough examination of alternative disposal options other than ocean discharge. There should be no discharge until all stakeholders and relevant international organizations confirm that such kind of discharge is safe and secure. So China again urges Japan to take seriously the legitimate concerns of the international community, earnestly fulfill its international obligations, conduct full consultation with its neighbors, stakeholders, and the relevant international institutions, dispose of the nuclear contaminated water in a science-based, open, transparent, and safe manner, place itself under strict international monitoring, and take credible steps to protect the marine environment and the health, rights, and interests of all peoples. So this is my introduction. Thank you.
好的，非常感谢孙司长。下面呢，我们有请刘新华首席专家发言。有请刘专家。
Thank you so much for the excellent speech from Director General Sun. And next, I'd like to invite the next speaker, Chief Expert Liu Xinhua, to give a speech.
女士们、先生们，下午好。
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
今天我想谈3个方面的问题。
Today, I'd like to share with you about the 3 parts of my speech.
第一个问题是多核素处理器运行具有不稳定性。
The first part of my speech is about the instability of the operation of the ALPS.
众所周知，在以往用ALPS处理污的污染水有79%是超标的，有些除外，甚至超标几万倍。
It is well known that in the past, Japan used the ALPS system to dispose the nuclear contaminated water. And among all of the water treated by the ALPS in Japan, 70% of them totally exceeding the standards. Some of the storage tanks even are totally beyond the standards for the tens of thousands times.
日计划对超标核污染水用 ALPS 进行2次处理，能否达标成疑？
Japan plans to use the ALPS system to treat and dispose the nuclear contaminated water for the second time because they already been exceeding the standard indicators and the requirements. But we still suspect and doubt whether the second time treated water could reach the standards.
第一，如此大量、如此成分复杂、如此多核素种类的核事故产生的这个核污染水，国际上没有先例，因此是没有成熟可用的处理技术。
We suspected it because of the following reasons. Firstly, these contaminated water made and caused by the nuclear accidents with such large quantity and very complex components, including so many different types of the nuclides. We do not have the precedents in the international arena, so we do not have the very mature technologies for the disposal of this contaminated water.
第二 ，ALPS 对D129处理效果较差。
The second reason is that ALPS system has a bad efficiency of the treatment of the iodine 129.
第三，日未对 ALPS 有关工艺参数或性能指标进行详细说明。日监管机构判断核污染水处理是否达标，主要依靠东京地理公司提供的信息，对 ALPS 运行可靠性的有效监督不够。
And the third reason is that Japan hasn't provided very specific elaborations or interpretations about the relevant indicators, configurations, and the performance indexes of the ALPS system. Japanese side monitoring organizations heavily relies on the information provided by the Tokyo Electric Power Company in terms of making the judgment of whether the contaminated water by the nuclear is reaching the standards or not. So their efficiency of the monitoring for the ALPS system operation and stability is totally not enough.
我今天下午想讲第二个问题是，核污染水排放控制的有效性存在质疑。
The second part of my today's speech is that we have the reason to doubt the efficiency of the control for the nuclear contaminated water discharge.
日本排海方案与机构的安全标准或国际良好实践不一致，排放控制缺乏有效性。
Japan's plan on the discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean is totally not consistent with the safety standards of the international organizations, as well as the best practices in the international arena. So its discharge control is lack of the efficiency.
第一，日方未设计川以外核素的拟排放总量控制值。
Firstly, Japan hasn't set up the total control value for the annual discharge of the nucleus, excluding tritium.
国际基本安全标准 IBSS 明确要求，流出排放应实行总量控制或浓度控制。
IBSS made it very clear that all the discharged materials should adopt the total amount control and concentration control.
第二，日方排放优化不充分。
Secondly, Japan's side didn't have the adequate optimization for its discharge.
日未从减少太平洋生态影响角度出发，根据洋流情况优化排海方案。
Japan hasn't focused on too much from the perspective of the reduction of the influence on the ecology of the Pacific Ocean, and didn't concern too much about the optimizing their plan of the discharge into the ocean based on the conditions of the currents.
第三，日方排放控制措施不完善。
And thirdly, Japan didn't have improved controlling measures for the discharge.
日在排放前将多个储罐或并进行批次排放，多个储罐中的核污染水混合后再进行监测，混合后的平均浓度达标，不能证明该批次所有储罐中核污染水都达标，因此可能存在无法识别的部分储罐中核污染水超标的情况。
Before discharge, Japan side put all multiple and the different storage tanks together and discharged the water, contaminated water, in batches. They just mix the nuclear contaminated water in the different storage tanks together and then to discharge it. After that, it conducted the monitoring. But it said that the average concentration of this nuclear contaminated water after mixture reached the standards of the discharge. However, that couldn't prove that all the nuclear contaminated water within the different storage tanks all reached the standards. Therefore, there might be some of the storage tanks contaminated water that totally exceed the standards, but that cannot be identified.
第四，日方未按机构放行废物处置前管理的安全全过程系统分析或安全评价标准开展安全全过程系统分析，不能充分证明核污染水处理和排放的长期安全性。
The fourth reason is that Japan didn't follow up the requirements of the IAEA GSG3, that is the safety process, a systematic analysis, and the evaluation before the radioactive waste disposal. It didn't conduct the safety cases in the whole process, which cannot prove that its nuclear contaminated water disposal and the discharge have the long-term security and safety.
下午想讲第三个问题是海洋环境建设方案不够系统全面。
Then I'd like to talk about the third part of my speech, which is about the not systematic and comprehensive plan for the monitoring of the marine environment.
日海洋环境建设方案不能满足海洋生态长期影响评价的需要。
Japanese scheme or the plan for the monitoring of the marine environment couldn't satisfy the demand of the long-term evaluation on the influence of the ecology system of the marine.
第一，日海洋环境建设范围太小，主要局限于排放口附近海域，监测赫数较少，未对排放的所有赫数进行监测，监测介质不全，海洋生物种类较少。
Firstly, the monitoring range of the Japan for the environment of the marine is too limited, which means that they only focus on the monitoring of the sea area or the marine area close to the discharge entry. And also, it didn't take the monitoring of a lot of the nuclides. It didn't take the monitoring for all the possible nuclides discharged. And also, it doesn't have the very comprehensive monitoring for the different monitoring mediums with the fewer and less categories of the marine biology or the creatures.
第二，日实施的是多部门联合监测方案，日核安全监管部门独立的监督性监测较弱。
Secondly, Japan adopted the plan or the method of the multi-departments joint monitoring, and the independent monitoring of the Japan's nuclear safety monitoring department is in a relatively weaker position of the monitoring and detection.
第三，没有周边利益相关国参与该监测方案。
And the third point is that there's no engagement and participation of the surrounding stakeholders or the relevant countries to participate in this monitoring process.
因此，日本应采取稳定可靠的处理措施，对超标核污染水进行二次处理。
Therefore, Japan should adopt the very stable and reliable treatment methods and measures to have the second-time treatment and the disposal of the nuclear contaminated water exceeding the standards.
建立完善的排放方案和海洋环境监测方案。
It should establish the improved scheme and the plans for the discharge, as well as the plan for the monitoring of the marine environment.
建立完善的监督方案和监督性监测方案。
It also needs to establish the improved monitoring scheme and the supervisory detection and monitoring plan.
并委托机构牵头开展有关利益官方参加的长期的全过程国际监督和监测。
It also needs to appoint and find the certain institutions to play the leading role to conduct the long-term and whole process international monitoring and detection with the participation of the stakeholders and relevant countries.
好，谢谢。
Thank you so much.
好的，非常感谢刘局长专家的发言。下面我们有请李志江局长发言，有请。
Thank you so much for the speech from the chief expert Liu Xinhua. Then I'd like to invite Secretary General Li Zhijiang to deliver a speech.
谢谢主持人，很高兴参加今天的媒体吹风会。
Thank you, the moderator, for your introduction. I'm so happy to participate in today's press conference.
中国军控与裁军协会作为中国民间的智库和非政府组织，同样十分关注日本福岛核污染水排海问题。
China's Arms Control and Disarmament Association, as the think tank of the Chinese private area and the non-governmental organization, paid more attention to the issue of the Japanese Fukushima discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean.
日本核污染水排海无异于向太平洋释放一头巨兽哥斯拉，将对全世界人类的福祉和海洋环境带来严重的风险。为此，我想再补充谈3点看法。
Japan's discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean is just like releasing a big giant into the Pacific Ocean like a Godzilla, which will definitely bring a serious risk and a danger to the well-being of the people in the whole world, as well as the environment of the ocean. Hereby, I would like to talk about the 3 parts of my viewpoints.
首先，日本核污染水排海的决定是不负责任的。
Firstly, the decision of Japan to discharge the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean is the irresponsible action.
刚才孙司长已经提到，日本政府曾经提出福岛核污染水的5种处置方案，认为海洋排放或者蒸汽排放在技术和操作上都是可行的。
Just now, Director General Sun mentioned that Japan ever put forward the 5 disposal methods and ways to discharge the nuclear contaminated water of the Fukushima, and Japan believed that the discharge into the ocean and the vapor release are totally feasible from the technical and operation perspective.
日本政府的专家委员会承认，蒸汽排放、新建储罐、水泥固化的其他的方案成本约5到37亿美元，而像海洋排放仅需要数千万美元。
Japanese government experts committee admits that vapor release, building up the new storage tanks, and the certification by cement, as well as the other ways, could have a cost of around the $500 million to the $3.7 billion, while the discharge into the ocean only cost tens of millions $.
因此，日本在没有充分论证多个处置方案的可行性，没有全面考虑对海洋生态环境、食品安全和人类健康的影响，就单方面决定向海洋排放核污染水，这将严重损害日本国内和周边国家人民的切身利益，严重侵犯相关国家人民的生命权、健康权、粮食权等人权。
Therefore, without the adequate proving of the feasibility of the different disposal plans and the methods, without considering too much about the influence of the action to the ecological environment of marine and food security, as well as people's health, Japan unilaterally decides to discharge the contaminated water into the ocean, which will definitely impair and damage the interests and benefits of the people in Japan as well as the surrounding countries. It also seriously infringed people's human rights, including the people's right of life, health, and food.
日方妄想把生米煮成熟饭，认为只要闯关成功，国际社会对此问题的关注度可能会不断的下降。但海洋不是日本的垃圾桶，日方的做法和决定是不负责任，也是不可接受的。
Therefore, Japan hopes to achieve the fact that what has been done cannot be done, and believe that if it can make it, the international community will reduce their attention to these issues. However, marine, the ocean, is not the trash bin of Japan. Japan's actions is totally irresponsible and also couldn't be accepted.
第二，日本核污染水排海的数据难以确证。
The second point from my side is that the data of the Japan's discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean couldn't be proved and verified.
大家都知道东电公司过去曾经有篡改、瞒报、虚报数据等恶劣的前科，因此国际社会都有充分的理由怀疑现在他们的数据真实性、可靠性是怎么样的。
It is well known that Tokyo Electric Power Company has the actions in the past of tampering the data or making the fake data as well as hiding the truth. So international community has enough reason to doubt and suspect the accuracy and reliability of the data related to the nuclear contaminated water discharge.
例如东电在2018年就没有能够有效地降低储罐中70%核污染水的放射性浓度，铯90和碘129等放射性核素的水平远高于监管水平几十倍甚至几千倍。东电因此不得不再次处理核污染水，也就是所谓二次处理水。
It is, for example, according to the disclosure of the media, in 2018, Tokyo Electric Power Company couldn't reduce the radioactivity concentration of the 70% of the nuclear contaminated water in the storage tank. Is the strontium 90 and the iodine 129, as well as the other radionuclides level, are totally tens or even thousands times higher than the required and monitored standards. Therefore, the Tokyo Electric Power Company had to retreat and dispose the nuclear contaminated water again, which is the second time disposal of the contaminated water.
福岛核电站未来退役过程中还会产生更多的核污染水，东电究竟将向太平洋排放多少吨的核污染水？这些水的总放射剂量是多少？都没有一个明确的答案。
In the decommissioning process of the Fukushima nuclear power plant, it may generate more nuclear contaminated water. And so we do not know how much water that has been contaminated by the nuclear the Tokyo Electric Power Company will discharge to the Pacific Ocean. What is the total amount of the radioactivity to the Pacific Ocean? Nobody could get the clear answer from that.
许多国际专家都认为，迄今为止有关排放数据确证的独立性和可验证性不是令人满意的。
And a lot of the international experts believe that so far, in terms of the independence and the verifiability of the data related to discharge, are not so satisfactory.
东电在得出核污染水质检合格的结论时，也没有检测大部分的放射性核素。
Tokyo Electric Power Company made a conclusion about the qualification of as the nuclear contaminated water quality. It didn't detect a lot of the reactive nuclides.
日方应该接受长期的国际监测安排，这样才能有助于促进国际社会对此做出科学的评估。
Japan's side should receive and accept the long-term international monitoring arrangement in order to promote the international community to make the scientific evaluation and assessment.
第三，日本核污染水排海也违反国际法义务。
The third point from my side is that Japan's discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into ocean violates the obligations in the international law.
不损害境外的环境是公认的一般国际法规则。
No harm to the environment out of the border of the country is publicly recognized the general rules of international law.
1982年联合国海洋法公约192条规定，各国有保护和保全安全环境的义务。
The item 192 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, enacted in 1982, regulates that all the countries have the rights and the obligations to protect and ensure the secure and safe environment.
194条规定，各国应采取一切必要的措施，确保其管辖或控制下的活动不致使其他国家及其环境遭受污染损害，并确保在其管辖或控制范围内的事件和活动所造成的污染不致扩大到其行使主权区域之外。
Item 194 regulates that all the countries should take all the necessary measures to ensure that the activities within its administration or control will not bring the harms or the contamination pollution to the environment of the other countries. And also need to ensure and guarantee that the pollution caused by the events or the activities within its administration or the control will not spread and expanded into the other regions out of its the sovereignty.
1972年伦敦氢废公约及其议定书也规定，禁止通过海上人工构建物向海洋倾倒放射性的废物。
London Dumping Convention and its protocols set up in 1972 also strictly regulates that it is totally forbidden to dump the radioactive waste into the ocean from the marine artificial structures.
日本核污染水排海将不可避免地造成海洋环境的跨境污染，日方的行为自然会违反相关的国际法。日方
Japan's discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into ocean will inevitably lead to the cross-border contamination to the marine environment. Japan's action violates the relevant international laws.
日方应基于国际环境法中的风险预防办法，谨慎对待此事，不应该随意的排污入海。
Japan's side should be based on the method of the risk prevention and control set up and regulated in the international environment law and cautiously treat these issues. It shouldn't randomly discharge the contaminated water into ocean.
此外，日本也没有履行应尽到的国际义务。
In addition, Japan didn't fulfill its obligations in the international arena.
根据一般国际法和联合国海洋法公约等规定，日方有义务采取一切措施，避免海洋污染，有义务通知并与可能受影响的国家进行充分的协商，有义务评估和监测环境的影响，有义务保障信息的完全透明，有义务开展国际合作。
According to the regulations in the general international law, as well as the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Japan has the obligations and duty to take all the measures to avoid marine contamination and pollution. It has the duty to notify all the possibly affected countries for the consultation. It has the duty and obligation to assess and detect and monitor the influence on the environment. It has the duty and obligation to ensure the transparency of the information. It has the duty and obligation to conduct international cooperation.
日方不能以任何借口逃避自己承担的国际义务，不能以接受国际原子能机构的技术审查为借口，逃避与利益相关方的商量，也不能片面的解读国际原子能机构的技术评估报告，为他们的排海计划洗白。谢谢大家。
Japan's side shouldn't take any excuses to avoid the fulfillment of international obligations. It shouldn't take the excuse of receiving the IAEA task force an interpretation of the review report of the IAEA only from its perspective and side in order to justify its discharge plan or to have the whitewashing. Thank you so much.
好的，非常感谢李秘书长发言。下面呢，我们进入自由交流的环节。我知道咱们在座的记者朋友肯定有很多问题想跟我们今天的3位嘉宾提问交流互动。欢迎记者朋友们踊跃提问。请举手。
Thank you so much for the speech from Secretary General Li Zhijiang. Then we'd like to come into the Q&A session. We know that all the media friends might have many questions. You want to have a communication with our 3 speakers here. So welcome all the media friends to put forward your questions.
这位第一排的女士。
So the lady in the first row, please.
So my question is to Director Sun. So some voices from Japan have accused China of politicizing the disposal of the contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant by raising the issue over and over again, especially after the Japanese side has repetitively explained that the wastewater is treated by ALPS and endorsed, approved by the AIEA. What's your response to this?
好的，那我接下来的问题是想问一下孙司长，日本呢曾强调并且指控说中国在尝试把日本福岛核污染废水排放的这个问题进行政治化，尤其是在日本多次解释说它是通过使用了多核素处理系统净化了这些处理水，并且呢将IAEA 也就是国际原子能机构的这个认证作为一个理由去提出申诉。那想问一下孙司长对于这个问题是如何回应？谢谢。
Thank you for the question. Indeed, Japan has voiced opposition to the term nuclear contaminated water and claiming the ALPS treated water is safe. But the problem is, Japan is yet to provide sufficient scientific and factual proof. What I would like to see is that, as I said in my introduction, the Japanese government said that the IAEA has already endorsed the discharge plan of the Japanese government. But we all know that the task force of the IAEA is still conducting its review and assessment mission in Japan. And so far, 3 reports have been issued. 1 report is pending, and not yet any final report. And according to the IAEA, no final conclusion will be drawn once the review is ongoing. So there is no final judgment, no final conclusion from the IAEA. According to the information provided by Japan this March, nearly 70% of the treated nuclear contaminated water exceeded the discharge limit of radionuclide activity concentration. So can we trust this kind of treated water is safe? And when Japan uses such kind of devices to discharge the contaminated water, and the discharging process is supposed to last for 30 years. So can we trust in 30 years these kind of devices will be safe? So as explained by today our scientists, so China's concerns and our positions are science-based, measured against international safe standards and international good practices. So our aim is to protect the interest of our own people and countries around the Pacific, to prevent any unimaginable or unforeseeable environmental disaster, and to protect the only planet we all live on. Thank you.
好的，谢谢。还有哪位记者要提问？
Thank you so much for the Q&A. And then, any other questions from the press?
那坐中间那台的先。
Thank you. From the Hindu newspaper. Recently, China has expressed concerns on 2 issues related to global nuclear safety, which are very different issues. One is the discharge of water by Japan that we've spoken about in India today, and of course the second is regarding the recent nuclear submarine agreement. Can you share your thoughts on your expectations from the IAEA in how it handles both these issues, which I know are different issues going forward? And also, more broadly, can you just share your own thoughts on what you think these issues tell us about the global nuclear non-proliferation regime as it stands today, its effectivity in handling these kinds of matters, as well as the challenges that it's facing? Thank you.
好的，那接下来这个问题呢，是关于我们说最近在中国其实是非常关注于两个关于全球的核安全的问题，一个是我们提到的一个日本福岛的这样的一个核污染水的一个排放问题，还有一个就是关于来自于就是对于核问题的一个达成一致和协议的问题。那我想问一下，您是否可以跟我们分享一下关于 IAEA 也就是国际原子能机构它所做的一些报告以及所做的一些行为是如何去影响我们在这方面的问题？还有呢，就是是否也可以跟我们去分享一下关于就是在这个国际原子能机构所做的一些行为，以及我们对于这些问题可能是如何去得到有效的解决，会有怎样的影响？谢谢。
抱歉啊，我先插一句，就是刚才那位记者，我们在回提问的时候，请把大家的这个社名，还有媒体名，还有来自哪个国家也介绍一下好吗？谢谢啊。
Thank you so much, and I would like to kindly remind all the media friends from the press. Later, if you ask the question, could you please say your name as well as which agency you come from? Thank you.
我们刚才那位记者是哪个印度
？So you are from the India.
印度。
What is the name of your press?
印度教徒报。
哦，印度教徒报，明白了。行，那我们看哪一位先生回答一下这个问题。
我可以补充一下。OK， 我可以补充。
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, I want to focus on today's topic. Indeed, we support the important role of the IAEA in terms of nuclear safety, including the issue you mentioned, non-proliferation. But today, I want to focus on the topic we have. With regard to the issue we have today, the nuclear contaminated water, we recognize the important role by the IAEA. In accordance or inconsistent with the mandate of the IAEA. We mentioned several times that upon the invitation of the Japanese government, the IAEA has sent a task force to Japan in order to measure the plan or the decision by the Japanese government against the international safety standards. But I have to see here that the task force has only a tailored mandate with a limited scope. Because we have been telling the Japanese government to have a comprehensive, thorough study of all options available to Japan. And the task force, the mandate of the task force has been limited within only one option, that is discharge into the ocean. As we just mentioned in the introduction, there are several options that can be considered, but the Japanese government only choose the option of discharging into the ocean. And so far, we haven't yet seen any or sufficient or convincing explanation from the Japanese government, why the other options are not viable, or is not better than the discharge into the ocean. Of course, we will wait and see the conclusions by the IAEA, but I have to see the task force has only a limited mandate. And whatever conclusion the task force may make in the future, it does not mean it is an endorsement that discharge into the ocean is the only viable option. Thank you. 你还有补充？
请补充。
I would add two brief points regarding your question. One is that last July, our association has published a research report on the AUKUS nuclear submarine cooperation, especially on its impact on the international nuclear non-proliferation regime, and why this cooperation will hamper and a dangerous approach in terms of the preserving the international nuclear non-proliferation regime per se, and how it violates the spirit and the articles of the NPT as well as the statute of the IAEA. Second point, I think you mentioned two very important subjects, and I believe, my personal view, I believe that the IAEA should play an important role to maintain the effectiveness and of the international nuclear security as well as the non-proliferation regime. But I should also remind you that the Secretariat of the IAEA has its mandate, and it is the member states of the IAEA should decide the substance of the matter relating in relation to the nuclear security and nuclear non-proliferation. I will stop here. Thank you.
好的，非常感谢。下面还有一些时间，还有记者有问题吗？
Thank you so much. We still have some time. Are there any questions from the press?
先这位女士。
Hi, from the Global Times. We talked with some experts from the neighboring country, especially the Pacific Island country, and they told us that Japan is very likely to go ahead with the discharge plan unless a neighboring country sues Japan at the International Tribunal for the law and the sea concerning the plan. So do you know if we have such plan to join a neighboring country to sue Japan? And also you mentioned that China has provided two sets of list of technical questions to Japan, but the second one, there was no feedback from Japan. So what's the plan what's the plan next? Like if we gonna communicate with Japan in the next month or next?
您好，这个我是来自于环球时报，然后想问一下是这样，我们知道就是在邻近的这些国家，尤其是对于就太平洋地区的这些邻国来说，日本呢它是有一些对于全球的就是一些计划，包括邻国呢是有一些要去共同去指控日本的这些行为，形成一个就是联盟团队的这样的一个形式。那我们中国是不是有相关的这个计划加入到邻国的这个行列，共同来去指责日本的这样的一个排水的就是排放的行为行径。那第二个问题呢是说，中国呢对日本提交了2份关于技术报告，其中呢在第2份技术报告方面，日本并没有做出任何的回应。那我们是不是接下来有一些具体的行动，比如说在下个月或者在之后与日本去要求他的一些回应？关于我们所提交的技术报告提交一些回应。谢谢。
Yeah, let me respond first. We would like to see, we don't have to go to that point. As I said, it is very important for the Japanese government to listen to the concerns voiced by China and Pacific Island countries to make its decision with the utmost prudence and do not start the discharge of contaminated water into the ocean unless all stakeholders, all neighboring countries are fully convinced that this is a safe and viable plan, and do not start its discharge plan before that. And I thank you for you mentioning the two lists of questions. The two lists of technical questions are all based on technological and professional assessment. So these are professional questions, technological questions, If friends from the media you're interested in those questions and the question we can provide you after this briefing. Actually, we have already submitted, together with Russia, those two set of list of questions to the IAEA. So it's open to the public. We haven't yet seen any feedback, convincing feedback from the Japanese government, especially with regard to the second questionnaire. Thank you.
我再补充一点啊，因为涉及到法律问题，我想更加精确一点，用中文再解释一下。
So I would like to add one point. In my point, it is related to the legal issue, so I would like to speak Chinese in order to make it more precise and accurate.
根据联合国海洋法公约的235条规定相关规定，日本这个排海的决定将造成海洋环境的损害，因此实施了国际不法的行为，并且可以归因为国家，所以日本应当承担相应的国家责任，包括停止这种排海的决定、赔偿、恢复原状等。
And according to the item or Article 235 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Japan's decision of the discharge of nuclear contaminated water into ocean will totally bring the damage and influence, bad and negative influence to the environment of the ocean and the sea. And it is totally the action that violates international law. So according to the law I mentioned, according to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Japan's action could be just considered as a action of the country, and it should undertake and shoulder its national responsibility, international responsibility. It should stop its discharge into the ocean and to provide some of the claims and compensations.
同时，根据联合国海洋法公约的相关规定，各国对于在其管辖下的自然人或法人污染海洋环境所造成的损害，应确保按照其法律制度，可以提起申诉，以获得迅速和适当的补偿或其他救济。
And according to the regulations within the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, all the countries could put forward their complaints if their region or their area already been polluted by the actions of the other countries. Based on the rule of law, they can ask for the proper compensations or the other ways of the relief.
因此，这个相关的法律责任这一块是有明确的国际法规定的。
So in terms of the legal regulations or the legal responsibilities, we have the statement and the laws within the international law.
谢谢。
Thank you.
好的，非常感谢。大家还有问题吗？第二排那个。
Any questions?
I'm from South Korea, MBC. I have two questions. How much damage do you expect to cause China if Fukushima contaminated water is actually released? Do you have any simulated data? Also, what kind of dialogue, what kind of communication are you having with neighborhood countries such as Russia and South Korea to solve this problem? In particular, if there is anything you want to cooperate with Korea, please tell.
Okay. 接下来是来自于韩国 NBC 的记者，他有两个问题。第一个问题呢，就是那中国是不是做过一些仿真数据，然后去预计如果日本福岛进行排海之后，可能会花费中国怎样的一个成本和资金来去处置这些被排放的污水？那还有一个第二个问题就是，中国是否计划与周边的邻国，例如俄罗斯和韩国去进行具体的对话和磋商，来去解决这些问题？如果有的话，中国是否已经制定了一些具体的项目或者是计划与像韩国这样的国家进行磋商？请分享，谢谢。
好，对，那我先讲。OK， 好。 So I will respond to your second question and ask my scientist to respond to your first question. Indeed, we have discussions or consultations with countries that have similar concerns, as you mentioned, including Russia, Republic of Korea, and also Pacific Island countries. I think the important thing is this is an issue that concerns not only Japan's neighbors, like China, Republic of Korea. This is planet for all countries, and we all need to voice our concerns to prevent unforeseeable damage to happen in the future. We also have discussions with countries within the IAEA through its professional and scientific perspective. This is an ongoing process. So, if in the future, as necessary, we will have further discussions and collaboration. And the two list of technical questions is a proof of cooperation between China and Russia. We worked out those technological questions. Indeed, these are the questions we have. These are the concerns, the question marks we have. So we also hope that those questions can help friends from the media to understand where indeed the concerns lie with this issue.
I would like to answer the first question you put forward.
日本波尔的黑暗储存这个废水吧，且大概130万吨，只是一部分，冰山一角。
For the 1.3 million tons of the nuclear contaminated water in the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, that is only a piece of the iceberg, very small part of the total.
福岛第一核电站的停业需要几十年，在这个过程中，海洋持续产生大量的污染水，排放时间可能远超过30年。
Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant need more than decades for its decommissioning. In this process, we will continue to generate large quantity of the nuclear contaminated water, and the discharge time may exceed more than 30 years.
因为核污染水当中含有多种长生命一类核素和超有核素。
For the nuclear contaminated water, it contains so many different long-lived fission nuclei as well as the transuranic nuclei.
那么开始我讲的几点原因，那么呢，ARPS 运行具有不稳定性，排放方案中对核污染水的排放控制措施的长期有效性存在质疑。
For the ALPS system operation, like what I mentioned, it is not stable and full of the uncertainties. In the discharge plan of Japan, we have the strong doubt as well as suspicion for the long-term efficiency of its controlling measures for the nuclear contaminated water discharge.
因此存在超标核污染水排放到海洋的可能性。
Therefore, it is totally possible to have the nuclear contaminated water discharged into the ocean, which totally exceeds the standards.
所以核污染水排海对海洋生态的长期影响具有不确定性。
Therefore, the nuclear contaminated water discharged into the ocean could bring the long-term uncertainties in terms of its influence on the marine ecological system.
只是需要具体的措施代价，这是为了评估不确定性，所以现在不能。
So we think that it is not so easy to evaluate and assess the specific cost we will have if they have the discharge of this nuclear contaminated water into the ocean, because we have so much uncertainties.
好的。 好的，非常感谢。还有吗？
Any questions?
那位，看不太清，那里头刚刚回来。
The gentleman at the corner, please.
谢谢，我是日本朝日新闻社的。我想问一个问题是，我今天听到了中方的对这个问题的担忧、疑问等等等等。我想问，如果包括你们刚才说的 IAEA 的最后报告或者最后认可，或者说日方能做到更科学、透明、可靠的方式等等，就是说，如果符合你们的条件的话，中国最终会不会接受这个排放的这个做法？还是你们认为日方还是需要寻找别的方法？或者这个寻找别的办法呢？这个问题都包含着这个时间的问题，不能花太多时间。所以这个方面呢，如果为了寻找别的办法，如果能够的话，中方有没有意向去起非常建设性的作用？能不能提供更具体的、更实在的帮忙？谢谢。
So this is the question from the Japan's news press, and the question is that we've already heard about the concerns from the Chinese side. My question is that if finally Japan could get the recognition or the approval report from the IAEA, or if the Japan's discharge action is totally scientific, transparent and reliable, which is totally consistent with the requirements, whether China will accept the action of Japan for the discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean, or China still require the Japan to seek for some other methods. We know that shouldn't be so time-consuming. If so, will China have any intention to join in the process of seeking for alternative methods instead of the discharge into the ocean? Will China play a more constructive role in it to provide very concrete and practical assistance for this process? Thank you so much.
We've been voicing concerns with regard to the option of discharging to the ocean, because if there will be unforeseeable consequences, it will be irreversible. So it's not an issue of timing or space. It is a question of environmental disaster that cannot be reversed. We have been suggesting to consider various options for the last at least 2 years. And the problem is not all the options have been thoroughly considered. So what we oppose is choose unilaterally one of the options, and without thorough discussions or consultations with other stakeholders, other countries that have concern, and make a unilateral decision in a hasty way that may produce or cause serious consequences. Of course, we are open to discuss with countries that have interest to go through those, go through the options available to us.
行，时间的关系，我们可能还只能在最后提一个问题。这位先生。
Due to time limit, we can only have the last discussion from the gentleman in the middle.
谢谢，我是日本交流电视台。如果日本按照原来的计划排放处理水的话，你们采取怎么样的措施？
So this question is also from the Japan press. The question is that if Japan still follow up the original plan in the past to discharge the water, the polluted or contaminated water into the ocean, what type of measures will China adopt?
Actually, this is the purpose for us to hold today's briefing, in order to present to you, friends from the media, from the press, what is indeed the scientific concerns that China have. Countries and the media need to speak and ask Japan to face up to its responsibilities, not to take any irresponsible action in a hasty way. If indeed the Japanese government push forward with this plan, and then we have to, countries around the Pacific, we have to, what is the actions we need to take to prevent disaster, environmental disaster, or unforeseeable consequences. So it's better to take preventive actions instead of take action after irresponsible decision. Thank you.
好的，其他先生没有补充了吧？由于时间的关系啊，今天我们的沙龙活动就到此结束了。
Due to time limit, that's all about our today's press conference.
刚才大家围绕这个日本核污染水排海的问题进行了非常坦诚的，也非常深入的讨论。
Just now, around the topic and the issue of Japan's discharge of the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean, we have the very in-depth discussion with each other. Also, we have the frank discussion with each other.
中方的意见呢已经表达得非常清楚，我相信大家对这一问题的严重性和紧迫性也有了更加深入的认识。
Just now, we have a very clear statement from the Chinese side in terms of the Chinese position and attitude towards this issue. And I believe that you have a deeper understanding about the seriousness and urgency of this issue.
不光是中国人民，这个日本人民、我国人民，还有全世界的各国人民，我想都希望日方还是能寻找一个更安全的替代方案，避免对我们大家共同拥有的这个海洋环境产生破坏。
Chinese people, Japanese people, as well as the people around the world, all hopes that Japan could seek for safer alternatives in terms of the disposal of this water in order to avoid a damage or the pollution to the marine environment that belongs to all of us.
再次感谢3位嘉宾。零甲7号沙龙呢，我们今后也将举办大家关心的各种沙龙活动，为媒体朋友们，特别是外国媒体、非经济媒体朋友们提供一个了解中国、交流观点的平台和窗口。欢迎大家继续关注、积极参与。今天的活动就到此结束，感谢大家。
I also thank you, media friends, for coming to this briefing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for the very detailed elaboration from the speakers and the Q&A session. And the Linjia 7 Salon press conference would like to hold more the activities in the various forums in order to provide a platform and a window for the foreign media friends to know about China and exchange viewpoints with us. Welcome all of you to continue to pay more attention and positively